Hi, Jeff here. We're going to be talking about the Cobb SF Air Box, and then we're going to go ahead and install it. Now, we already have the Cobb SF air intake on the 15 STI. We're going to go ahead and show you how to get the box in place. First thing I like to do is tell you guys what the gains are from putting these parts on your cars. So, for the box, what it's going to do is eliminate ambient temperature in the engine bay with the filter. So you're going to get as much cold air into the filter as possible. For anybody who knows that cold air is more compression, better boost, it all leads one thing to another, and overall will help the function of your vehicle. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and get this Cobb air filter off, and we're going to pull the induction off and put the box in, slap it together, and you guys will be good to go. So real quick, as I take this piece off, we're going to explain what it does. This will pull air in from the bumper cavity and force it into the filter. Now sometimes these clips right here that I'm messing with can be tricky. Just take your time, be very careful, you don't want to damage them. I always recommend when you're done with them, putting it up by the cowl so you know where the parts are. But back to a further explanation, what this will do is drive air into the box to keep the filter cool, keep the air going into the engine cool, and pretty much help ensure the fact that you're getting as cold air as possible. Once you get that off, you remove it off to the side, you check it out, look at the parts. It's all plastic. It's just a little funnel that'll force air into the box. Next step for this instructional video, I'm just going to pull the connector off. Set this off to the side for the MAF sensor. We're going to disconnect the worm clamp, loosen that up. Do not have to remove it, just loosen it up. For the best result of this video, we're going to actually remove the filter from the bracket, which is a 10mm ratchet, 10mm socket on a ratchet, and or a 10mm wrench. Open end, closed end, doesn't matter, just 10mm. We lost a washer, which is okay, we'll get that. There's only 2 bolts that are holding the filter on the bracket. This time we're not going to lose the washer. We're going to make sure to be very careful and get both washers because there are 2 located on this bolt. Now that we have that, we're just going to maneuver the filter little by little. Try not to damage anything. It's going to fight you a little bit, and if you guys have trouble pulling it from that area, you can loosen up the worm clamp on the turbo inlet and remove it from there as well. Sometimes it's a little easier to work with this side of the intake rather than the filter side. And I just recommend moving it up like that and it'll come right off. I always inspect for any type of oil, not that you'll get it here, but you want to check for cracking, damage, over tightening of the clamp where it'll cut in, where the silicone is meshed into the worm clamp. That'll be okay because these are multi-layered. It's not going to cause any damage or leaks, but just make sure you always inspect your parts when you take them off. It'll give you a heads up on any faulty and or damaged parts. So we're going to set this off to the side and continue the install with the box. Next we're going to put the box in, put the bolts in, and we're good to go. So as you put the box in, it's going to be a little tight maneuvering it in there, which is okay. But remember that you want to get it fit in the right spot. Before we do that, we have to take one of the bolts off that is going to hold the box in place. This bolt here that holds your power steering fluid reservoir is going to come out and be replaced with a longer aftermarket bolt that Cobb supplied in the SF box filter kit. Again, this is a 10mm, just socket, wrench, anything that will pull it off. You guys learn how to do it with the screwdriver. That's new to me, but pretty much any 10mm tool will get it. Now that you have this maneuvered, you do not need to remove it. The box should sit over, and then you will bolt it back into place with the longer bolt. So now we're going to move the filter box into place. And one thing you will also notice as we get down there, there is another bolt here that we're going to have to remove due to the fact that we already had a filter. So back to those ratchets. This is my electric Matco ratchet. Obviously not all of you are going to have one of these, which is okay. Use a hand ratchet. I'm going to use this just to speed up the process. We're going to remove that bolt we talked about for the box just because we already had the air filter on. That way we can kind of bolt it together. This bracket is going to bolt under the box, but we're going to use the same bolt. Try not to drop it. Now this is going to be the tricky part. We're going to have to put the box in with this bracket underneath the box to bolt it in. And we're going to have to make sure everything's pretty much aligned. I'm going to snug the bolt up but not tighten it so we can maneuver the parts for fitment. So as you see how this is going to work, the bracket's going to sit underneath the box. And you're just going to have to take your time. It's going to fight you. It's not going to want to play nice, which is okay, because at the end of the day, you'll have a better sense of accomplishment. So now once you get it down there, get it in the right location. I'm going to use a wise trick and just take the extension in the socket and just try and start it without using any type of tools like a ratchet and or my electric ratchet. That's going to do is help prevent cross threading. Once you get it started, just get it a little hand tight and then remove your ratchet or your socket ratchet combination. Now we're going to work on this side of the filter. We're going to line the hole up and get it to where we need it to go to put the bolt on. So this is the part where we're going to put the bolt and the nut to hold this air box to the bracket for that factory air box location. Cobb supplies you with these aftermarket bolts. You're going to use the longer of the two for this section. They should both be the same thread and should both be 10mm drive. Again, we're not going to screw everything together. One thing I'm going to talk about real quick, me as a mechanic, I like to make things as neat as possible. Since you're going to put a lid on top of this, we're going to put the nut on the inside. That way it kind of looks a little cleaner and it's a little bit more presentable for those who like to go to car shows and show off their hard work. To get it lined up, just kind of get it snug. Again, remember, we want to kind of test fit everything to where we can maneuver it if we need to and get everything kind of situated. Next, we're going to install that little bit longer grade 8 10mm bolt for the power steering. Now that that one's tight, I'm going to test fit the filter back where it needs to go to make sure that I can get it in place. I'm going to tighten up the rest of the bolts and we'll put everything together. So on my fitment back in here, I noticed one thing which I'm going to discuss real quick. When we put this in here, we have to get the MAF sensor to we have to get the harness for the MAF sensor to the MAF sensor, right? So that being said, there's 3 different options. Me personally, like I said with the bolt here, I like to go with the cleanest, the most professional look. But if you're in a hurry or you want to do it another way, you can go through the induction where the filter actually sits. But the way that I'm going to explain is going up underneath. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the zip tie on both locations and run the MAF sensor harness up underneath the box. I'm not going to show you that because it's going to take a little bit of time and I'd like to kind of keep the video as short and sweet as possible for you guys. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We'll get to the fitment of the filter and we'll bolt this back. Now we're going to go ahead and install the filter back into the airbox. Like I told you before, we rerouted the harness for the MAF sensor. So here we're going to go and put it back on. So this is kind of just a finesse. You want to take your time, get it on there pretty good so it doesn't come off. Once you get the bracket situated, we're going to start the bolts again on this side, and then we'll tighten up on the bottom. So remember I dropped that washer? We went ahead and picked it up during takes. So those are those two bolts that hold it to the bracket. Now we're going to go ahead and tighten up the rest of the airbox. Again, remember I do have the power of electric tools, so if you guys can, go ahead and buy yourself some. If not, hand tools work just as good. So now that those are tightened, we're going to go ahead and tighten up that bottom bolt that holds the Cobb box, as well as the filter bracket. I've used a regular extension and a wobble extension just so I can get down there and get on the bolt head. Now that that's tight, we're good to go to plug the MAF sensor in. Please don't forget to do that. You will trip a check engine light and car will run a little funky, if you know what I mean. So now that that's plugged in, we're going to tuck the wire as far down as we can. Then we're going to go ahead and grab the top piece. Now one thing I recommend is with this molding, it doesn't always like to stay on until after it sets. Just put some super glue on it and let it sit before you guys install it. I'll do that after I install this video and go ahead and clean that up. Just some learning experiences as you go. So now we're going to go ahead and place the top part of the filter box on. And this is just going to take a little bit of time getting all the bolts. Remember how I told you guys, keep everything loose. Sometimes it's a good idea to try and keep the box a little loose for placement, but you know, it's going to be harder to go back and tighten bolts you can't access with the lid on. So Cobb supplies you with the 4 hex heads that you need, and they actually supply you with a hex key. Don't forget to use your little nylon washers as to not damage this pretty cover. So again, I'm just going to start them. I'm not going to tighten them just because you want to be able to maneuver the lid and get the rest of them in. We're going to go ahead and tighten all these up pretty snug. You don't want to over tighten them. Again, remember there is a chance you could always break the bolt off, and that'll cause no fun for you later on.
You were pulling the little hex key out of the back. I was like, it's like IKEA. They even give you the Allen key.
So don't forget to come over here and tighten the first clamp that we loosened. I'm going to point the head this way. You can use a flathead screwdriver or an 8mm socket with a ratchet. Me personally, a screwdriver is a little bit more personal. You can feel how tight the clamp is, that way you don't damage anything. Just get these snug, don't go too crazy tight. And last but not least, we're going to go ahead and install that induction piece we spoke of at the beginning of the video. Good to go.
Wait, that's it?